Millions are without power and water. Tens of thousands of Japanese troops are drafted in as an international rescue and relief effort gears up. Well, Japan has appealed to the international community for help in coping with the disaster. A rescue team from South Korea has already got to work. Another from the UK is beginning searching for survivors, with experts from the United States and Australia to follow.
Dangerous rooftop rescues, people being pulled from piles of rubble, and emergency evacuations. The rescue and relief effort in Japan has been non-stop since the earthquake first hit on Friday. Japanese troops are working alongside 62 teams from the Red Cross looking for survivors in the worst affected areas along the northeast coast. The government says more than 3,000 people have been rescued so far, but they need help. And countries like the UK have been quick to offer it. A 59-strong search and rescue team flew out from Manchester last night, with sniffer dogs trained to find survivors. Teams have also been sent from places like Germany and South Korea, while the US has been sending out helicopters loaded up with supplies and offering assistance from 3 warships off the coast of Japan. Emergency teams are being hampered by more aftershocks, further tsunami warnings and ongoing fires. But the sheer scale of the devastation and the hundreds of thousands of people who have been displaced means the rescue and relief effort is likely to continue for many days to come. Aisling McVeigh, BBC News.
Well, Ian Wolverton from the charity and relief organisation Save the Children is in Asahi City, east of Tokyo, and he told me what his team is planning to do there.
We're coming here because there are reports that up to 19,000 households could have been affected by the tsunami and the earthquake. So we're trying to get a sense of what's happening here to see if we can set up what we call child-friendly spaces, so that children have a safe place to play whilst their parents go on to get emergency relief from the authorities. So it's early days for us in terms of our response, but clearly the needs of children and their families are going to be huge.
Sure, and what about the priorities for the rest of the rescue effort? Is it still very much in a rescue phase, or are you moving more into relief now?
Well, we're only a few days into this disaster response operation, so from my previous experience in many disasters, I can tell you that the focus for the time being is going to be the relief efforts. I mean, your report was talking about what was happening in the north of the country, which is very much focused on the relief operation at the moment. What Save the Children is trying to do is trying to get to some of those areas that perhaps have not been prioritised for emergency assistance at the moment, and trying to find out precisely what the needs might be in places like Asahi City.
Do you have what you need, Ian, in terms of the hardware, in terms of the supplies to do what you need to do?
Well, the Japanese authorities are extremely good at responding to these types of disasters. Now, of course, any nation would be stretched by a major disaster like this, but certainly we have to acknowledge that the Japanese authorities are extremely well prepared to respond to these types of disasters. But clearly the needs are great, and the agency I work for, Save the Children, has a particular focus on children and their families. So we'll be conducting our assessments and as quickly as possible fanning out into the areas of greatest need to ensure that children and their families get access to things like child-friendly spaces, to ensure that children don't have to suffer the long-term psychological consequences of the trauma they've experienced.
And Ian, clearly you've worked in a lot of disasters, a lot in this region. How would you judge the coordination and speed of response that we've seen so far?
Well, I've only been in country for a few days. I have to make that clear. But from what I've read and from what I've seen so far, I have to say that the coordination of this emergency response has been extremely good so far. Again, I'd say that's because the Japanese authorities are so well prepared to respond to these types of disasters. Now, clearly, any nation, whether it's a developed or less developed nation, is going to have a particularly hard time responding to a disaster on this scale. Driving through the parts of the country I'm in today, there are no visible signs of damage to buildings because of the earthquake, because of the strict building codes that are adhered to here. But of course, it's very difficult to prepare for a 10-metre tsunami wave.
We do also, of course, have to talk about the dangers of that nuclear reactor. How much of a concern is that for you, and are you able to actually mitigate against that?
Well, obviously everybody's watching that that's very closely indeed. It's a concern for all of us here in Japan, of course. You know, it's really an issue that you know, frankly, aid organisations have very little expertise in. But again, of course, the Japanese authorities are very well prepared for these types of emergencies. So it's something we're all monitoring very closely.
As Ian Wolverton of Save the Children.
Away from northeast Japan, the authorities are sending huge contingents of troops and police to help with rescue efforts as the scale of the devastation caused by the tsunami becomes clearer. The police say more than 10,000 people may have lost their lives in one of the worst affected areas, the northern coastal region of Miyagi. The number of troops is being doubled to 100,000. They will be joined by an additional 250,000 police officers and other relief workers. Rescue workers have found scenes of total devastation in isolated coastal towns. The Japanese authorities face a long and tough task when it comes to counting the number of dead from the earthquake and the tsunami. Thousands are missing. So what are the official statistics? Earlier, my colleague Roz Atkins asked a spokesman for the Japanese Prime Minister, Noriyuki Shikata.
Well, it has been very difficult to confirm the number of deaths, and we have confirmed the deaths of over 1,200 and missing over 1,000. But in order to confirm who are missing, we need to get the better information. So it's been a very difficult operations.
And what can you tell us about this latest warning from the IAEA about a second nuclear plant in Japan?
Well, this is a so-called Unit 3 reactor, and what we have been doing is, since this morning, we have been injecting pure water, boric acid, and seawater, and the Unit 3 reactor is now under control.
We appreciate you answering that question. Here is a point from Lauren in Indiana in the United States who says, many of us want to help Japan, but what would you like us to do?
Well, actually, there are some volunteers who try to go to the affected region, but it is very difficult and sometimes dangerous for other people to join those operations along with self-defense forces or police or coast guards. And if you're living overseas, what we appreciate is donations to, for example, International Red Cross.
First, what the ICRC's role is there.
Well, the main focus for the Red Cross, and the Japanese Red Cross is very much leading the effort here, is to get medical support out to people as quickly as possible. I'm here at the hospital in Ishinomaki, and the situation is dire. This is a town of about 130,000 people. Half the town was engulfed by the tsunami, and the scene of devastation is absolute. There are pockets of people who are still stranded. They're limping into the hospital as I speak. Just 5 minutes ago, I witnessed an elderly lady who just died before she could get through the doors. The Red Cross are doing an incredible job here. They've had volunteers coming in from all parts of the country. But there are helicopters going ahead, there's emergency vehicles, constant sirens trying to reach people who are still stranded out there.
Okay, how do you do it? If the roads aren't functioning, if the railways aren't functioning, is it just helicopters?
Well, some of the roads are open, but helicopters are the main way to get to inaccessible areas. I mean, just 5 miles down the road from here, there's a bridge that was washed away. There are people on the other side. And there's about 700 people in an evacuation center. One of our medical teams had to get over there by helicopter just to take them 3 days of food and water and evacuate some more seriously injured people. I mean, it's a desperate situation here, and you don't really get a picture if you're sitting in Tokyo or even if you're really sitting in Sendai either. I was there this morning, and yes, the power's off. People are facing difficulties, but compared with here, it's nothing. I mean, there's a real threat, particularly amongst the elderly here, many of whom are suffering from hypothermia because they were caught in the tsunami, they were caught in the water, and it is bitterly cold at night. So it's a very worrying situation, and hopefully it will stabilize in the coming days if the power comes back on, if food starts coming back into the shops. But people are in a deep state of shock here. It's very evident.
You're talking there about the power coming back on, and yet the Prime Minister a little earlier today talking about, in effect, rolling power cuts. That's exactly what you don't need.
That's exactly what we don't need, and in fact we're very worried at the hospital because it is the main hospital for the area. It serves a radius of at least 100 kilometers, a catchment of 200,000 people, most of whom are living in evacuation centers. I mean, in where I am now, Ishinomikai, it's just a very dire situation because people have no heating, they can't cook warm food, and there's no running water. So the hospital has become like a center where people are just gravitated towards because they've got nowhere else to go.
Patrick Fuller from the ICRC.
Japan has mobilized 100,000 troops to search for survivors after the devastating earthquake and tsunami. The international community is sending aid as well as search and rescue teams to Japan, especially the United States, which counts Japan as a key ally in the region. The Pentagon has sent a second U.S. aircraft carrier to the island nation with the possibility of deploying more. Tokyo welcomes the aid, but a government spokesman has asked for donations to the Red Cross, saying the mass deployment of foreign aid workers will cause problems due to the language barrier.
Now, setting aside tensions which date back to World War II, China is helping Japan with its aid operation following the earthquake and tsunami. Taiwan has also sent a specialist team, while India, Pakistan and Afghanistan have also pledged to help. The BBC's Helen Fawkes has more.
China says it's stretching out a helping hand to Japan. A team of 15 rescuers arrived in Tokyo on a specially chartered flight to assist the search for survivors. They came with 4 tons of equipment. We've been closely following developments and have decided on some of our plans already, this rescuer says. We'll also be getting guidance and commands from the Chinese embassy and consulates in Japan. This move by China comes just months after a bitter territorial dispute between Asia's 2 largest economies and years of simmering tensions. The Chinese team join a massive relief effort which involves 100,000 Japanese troops as well as 250,000 police officers and other workers. It's a dangerous operation, with rescuers being hampered by fires, continuous aftershocks and tsunami alerts. Some areas remain unreachable. As well as searching for the missing, humanitarian aid is also being distributed. India is to send plane loads of woolen blankets to affected areas. Pakistan's president is offering all possible assistance, including field hospitals, and Sri Lanka is sending medical assistance and military relief. This team of 35 is from Taiwan. Rescuers are being deployed from all over the world. Taiwan has also been asked to send generators, clothing and food. The international community is stepping up its relief operation, and with Japan facing its worst crisis since the Second World War, more teams are on standby. Helen Fawkes, BBC News.
Now, the BBC's Roland Burke has been to an evacuation centre in Hitachi, which is about 200 kilometres south of Sendai. He sent this report.
It's dinner time at this evacuation centre. The food's been provided by soldiers from Japan's ground self-defence forces. Now, when the earthquake hit, lessons were going on here. This place is a high school, but within half an hour it had been turned into an evacuation centre, and now people are spending their 3rd night here. This is Hitachi, a city around 200 kilometres south of Sendai, the worst hit place. But even here, homes have been damaged. Water, electricity and gas is still cut off in some places.
The moment the earthquake happened, I saw many things collapse. Everybody started to panic, because this was the first time it had happened to any of us.
Well, I thought I'm going to die. I thought I was going to die now.
The Japanese learned from childhood that earthquakes can happen at any time. Perhaps that's why they are so remarkably stoical. There are few complaints here. but no one in this hall knows when they'll be able to go home.
Roland Burke there.